Welcome to Supernatural Insight. I'm Lorne. Thank you for listening in on this presentation today. If this is your first Supernatural Insight presentation, I encourage you to watch the first episode, The Israelites and the Ancient Near East Worldview. We're discussing the worldview of the peoples of the ancient Near East, and looking at the various cultural background and the literature associated with this particular time in the history of the ancient Near East. What you will learn here today is not something you will hear at church or in a sermon or in a Bible class or Sunday school class or even at a Bible college. But it's something that I want to bring to your attention because it will, of course, affect the way that you approach the Bible, and that you perhaps will never approach the Bible the same way again. I think this is a very fascinating subject. It's one I've been interested in for a long time, and I have done quite a bit of reading and research on this subject. Let us look at Yahweh and the Divine Assembly. First, to recap on a previous presentation in the first and second episode, there was a tremendous discovery, a significant discovery in the ancient Near East, or in the area of the ancient Near East, of course, in our modern times. An archaeological discovery took place in Syria, a discovery that brought to light many ancient temple tablets of the Canaanite religion. This happened when a farmer was plowing his field and uncovered something that led to a very significant discovery, which is the forgotten Canaanite city of Ugaritic. And it was discovered in 1928. That's some time ago, but nothing compared to the history of the ancient Near East. That turned out to be an ancient seaport that was at its political, religious, and economic greatness around the 12th century BC. On excavation of the city at Ras Shamra, Syria, which is like maybe 10-12 kilometers north of Beirut on the coastline of the Mediterranean, several clay tablets of cuneiform were found, all dating around 1200 BC. Although belonging to the Canaanite family, the Ugaritic cuneiform alphabet and the consonant script is closer to biblical Hebrew. Both in context and language, heretic stories in the Ugaritic and the biblical literature have much in common. So there's a comparison going on here. So we're looking at least the scholars have looked at, those who can read and the scripts themselves and the language, come up with some very interesting observations. The Ugaritic text shows certain cultural similarities with early Israelite material, and please keep in mind these are similarities. They're not exactly the same. There's differences between them, but they show a common cultural background, of course, and thus provides us with some background regarding the development of the Israelite religion. So it helps us to understand the origins of the Israelite religion and how it came to be. Other tablets were written in unknown West-Semitic language, and others found in the same location were written in other cuneiform language. And the Sumerians developed the cuneiform language, was the first written language. Cuneiform languages such as Akkadian, Hurarian, as well as Egyptian. Now, the tablets revealed an old Canaanite mythology naming three prominent deities: El, the supreme deity; Asherah, the lord of the sea; and Baal, the lord of the heavens, better known as the cloud rider. Again, they are there are sons, divine sons, gods, belonging to El's family. They are one big family. El and his consort Asherah, with 70 sons. Now that sounds to be a lot of sons, but that's really not a large family. It's a typical family size of the ancient people. Now, scholars who have studied the ancient texts have identified a category used in both Mesopotamia and Syria texts referring to groups of deities as council or assembly. This feature is dominant in the Mesopotamia and Ugaritic texts. Now, Michael S. Heiser says, he's a scholar with a PhD. It's no surprise to find references in the Bible using similar language, he says. As a West-Semitic language, Ugaritic language or text is closely related to biblical Hebrew, sharing a good deal of vocabulary as well as relating to forms of words, structure of sentences, and the way the language is arranged. When closely examined, many of the Ugaritic tablets were found to contain words and phrases describing a council of gods that have verbal expressions parallel to the Hebrew Bible. The Ugaritic divine council was led by El, the same word used in the Hebrew Bible for deity and as the proper name for the God of Israel. Isaiah 40, 18, and Isaiah 43 and 12. Now, there are explicit references to a council or assembly of El, and in some cases, overlapping word for word with those in the Hebrew Bible. One such text that presents Yahweh in a council setting is Psalm 82 and 1. God, Elohim, stands in the divine assembly among the divinities, Elohim. Now, the word Elohim for God can be a singular, used for a singular God, or a group of gods. It would be very similar to the use of the word sheep. Sheep is one, and sheep can be a herd as well. Here, Elohim can stand for one God, or it can also speak for a group or an assembly of divinities. It says in Psalm 82 that God stands in the divine assembly among the divinities. He pronounces judgment. Here the figure in heaven is God who stands in his place in the assembly, and the assembly consists of all the gods of the world, for all the gods are condemned to death in verse 6. Quote, I myself presume that you are gods, sons of the Most High, yet like humans you will die. That's what it says. Yet like humans you will die and fall like any prince. Then comes a voice speaking loudly, calling for God to take his place as judge of all the earth in verse 8. Arise, O God, judge the world, for you inherit all the nations. Each of these sons has a different nation assigned as his patrimony or family inheritance, and therefore serves as its ruler. Yet verse 6 calls on Yahweh to take to himself the traditional inheritance of all the other gods, and thereby making Israel and all the world the inheritance of Israel's God. Deuteronomy 32, verses 8 to 9, also presents this view of the divine arrangement of the world preserved in Greek, that is Septuagint, and the Dead Sea Scrolls. Quote, when the Most High allotted peoples for inheritance, when he divided up humanity, he fixed the boundaries for peoples according to the number of the divine sons, for Yahweh's portion is his people, Jacob, his own inheritance. Mark S. Smith contends the traditional Hebrew text, the Masoretic text, or known as the MT text, perhaps reflects a discomfort with this polytheistic theology of Israel, for it shows not divine sons, B'nai Elohim, as in the Greek and the Dead Sea Scrolls, but sons of Israel, B'nai Yisrael. E. Tov labels the MT text here as anti-polytheistic alteration. The text of the Septuagint and the Dead Sea Scrolls shows the Israelite polytheism that focuses on the central importance of Yahweh for Israel within the larger scheme of the world. Yet, this larger scheme provides a place for the other gods of the other nations in the world. Smith says it is shown in Exodus 15 and verse 11 and 1 King chapter 22 and verse 19. There was a multitude of divinities in Israelites' polytheism. With the host of heaven in attendance, the divine assembly of Yahweh is full. Exodus 15 and 11 says, "Who is like you among the gods, O Lord?" And 1 King 22 and verse 19. Micaiah says, "Therefore hear the word of the Lord. And I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him on his right and his left." Of course, archaeologist and also an historian, William G. Dever, who spent years doing archaeological digs in Israel and Palestine area. Well, he has many books out, and he is a renowned archaeologist, of course. He argues strongly for a case that Israel's religion began as a polytheistic and evolved into monotheism. This is what he says. The assumption here was that from the Mosaic times before the conquest and settlement of Canaan, there had existed a pure Yahweh monotheism. All later reforms thus attempted to recall wayward Israel to its original religion, which was not simply an idea, but the reality from the formative years onward. Dever believes this is a false notion held by many biblical commentators and theologians. Of course, not everybody's in agreement with Dever. Michael S. Heiser, who holds a PhD in Hebrew Bible and Semitic studies. He firmly holds to the view that plural Elohim does not mean polytheism. There is no basis, he says, for concluding that the biblical writers would have viewed Yahweh as no better than another Elohim. A biblical writer would not have presumed that Yahweh could be defeated on any given day by another Elohim, or that another Elohim had the same set of attributes. That is polytheistic thinking. It is not the biblical picture, he says. The biblical writer speaks of Yahweh in ways that telegraph their belief in his uniqueness and incomparability. Perhaps it's necessary to suggest that neither polytheism nor monotheism best describes Israel's religion. Maybe we need a new term, a new description. No one among the ancient Israelites would have considered themselves polytheist, because they just never used that word, or monotheist. Monotheism is a relatively modern concept which was coined in the mid-17th century by the British philosopher Henry Moore, 1614-1687. The problem with such categories is retrojection. Retrojection into biblical texts, a singularity of divinity that the Bible itself does not claim for ancient Israel. If you would look up the dictionary definition of enotheism, monolatry, and monotheism, you would get the impression that the use of monotheism is used in a way not supported by the dictionary. Now, the idea of an exclusive belief in and worship of one God and the denial of even the existence of other gods with no reality at all is not supported by the dictionaries. A narrow definition of monotheism is the belief in the existence of only one God that created the world and intervenes in the world. A distinction may be made between the exclusive monotheism and both inclusive and diverse monotheism. Now that's a mouthful. But monotheism is distinguished from enotheism, a religious belief in which the believers worship one God without denying that others may worship different gods with equal validity. Monolatry is a recognition of the existence of many gods, but with the consistent worship of only one deity, and not allowing others to worship other gods. Kyle MacArthur Jr., an Old Testament scholar who is best known for his work on the books of Samuel, offers significant insight on family religion. Israel went through a process of ethnic self-identification. Yes, self-identification. When it established itself in Canaan, it involved Israel drawing boundary lines between itself and other people. The Israelites were those who worshiped Yahweh. The Ammonites were those who worshiped Milcom, the god of Ammon. And the Moabites were those who worshiped Chemos, the god of Moab. And the Edomites were those who worshiped Quaz, the god of Edom. The god El and Baal received the greatest popularity as family gods. Primarily, devotion to a chief national god was the pattern in the Iron Age Palestine. This suggests that Yahwism and Israel emerged at the same time as part of the same process. Somewhere in the sparsely populated hills of late Bronze Age, there was a people called Israel. When newcomers or non-Israelites settled in the hills after the Bronze Age was over, at the beginning of the Iron Age, they joined themselves with this ancient Israelite group. Now, you got to keep in mind there was intermarriages, marrying from outside of the clan of the Israelites into the Canaanite, and so it was not just Israelites. They mixed. There was a mixed group of newcomers, obviously, brought their family shrines with them and their family gods. The focus of religious life were local manifestations of family religion. That was the reality, the cultural reality of this time in history. Family identity was anchored in the cult of the ancestors and the worship of local gods. This was the reality. Karl van der Toorn, an historian at University of Amsterdam, did extensive research on the earliest Israelites. He made really outstanding observations about the structure of the early Israelite society and how it was transformed by the establishment of the monarchy under Saul. With the rise of the state, there also came with it a state religion. So he says, of course, The religion of the state was an extension of Saul's family religion. Saul, being devoted to Yahweh as his family god, he promoted Yahweh as the patron god of the new state. And so from now on, the two, family, clan, and state religion, would be in competition, reducing family religion to the private realm and the religion of the state being the public realm. To unify state control over its subjects, the authorities tried to bring the traditional family religion within the realm of the state. The cult of Baal was admitted to the state temples, and El became identified with Yahweh. Of course, you have the fall of Samaria in 621 BC, the collapse of the northern kingdom, and the subsequent fall of the southern kingdom 597 BC brought about the end of both Israelite state religion and Israelite family religion. The Israelites refugees were a people who lost its traditional badge of identity. Now, keep in mind their earlier symbols of identification: the homestead, the local high places, ancestral graves, local shrines, and national sanctuaries were inaccessible. The Israelites looked for a new symbol. God himself becomes accessible not by means of rituals, festivals, images, or holy place, but under the form of personal devotion to the written words. The Israelites becomes a people of the book. The development of monotheism came late in the period of the monarchs, if not later still, after ancient Israelites' history was over. For the majority, monotheism had not been the reality for the ancient Israelites. Psalm 29 calls divine being to join in the praise of Yahweh. Job 1-2 presents divine beings coming before God, including the Satan. According to use biblical text to establish monotheism or even monolaitry, historically before the 7th century BC is difficult. Most of the references to monotheism comes from the exilic period or the captivity period or later, and Jeremiah 16 and 19 points to the late pre-exilic period. Michael S. Heiser contends that another misguided strategy is to argue that statements in the Old Testament that have sayings, "There is none besides me," means that no other Elohim exists. That isn't the case. These denial statements do not deny that other Elohims exist. Rather, they deny that any Elohim compares to Yahweh. Exodus 15 and 11 begs the question, who is like you among the gods, O Lord? 1 Kings 8 and 23. O Yahweh, God of Israel, there is no God like you in the heavens above or on earth below. Psalm 97 and 1. For you, O Yahweh, are most high over all the earth. You are highly exalted above all gods. They are statements of incomparability. This denial language shows up in the Bible. You can find this in Isaiah 47 and 8 and Zephaniah 2 and 15, which have Babylon and Nineveh personified, and it's saying, there is none besides me. Yes, like Babylon and Nineveh saying, there is none besides me. Are we to believe that the point of the phrase is to declare that no other cities exist except Babylon or Nineveh? Well, Michael says that would be absurd. The point of the statement is that Babylon and Nineveh considered themselves incomparable as though no other city could measure up to them. No other city is as great as they are. This is precisely the point when these same phrases are used of other gods. They cannot measure up to Yahweh. Those who want to deny that other Elohims do not exist are at odds with the supernatural worldview of both the biblical writers and the cultures of the ancient Near East. When we begin this journey, in my first episode, I shared with you that we would be venturing into the minds of an ancient people and how that experience alone would change the way we understand and approach the Bible. Sometimes individuals may be blinded by traditions, and it's difficult to rethink, reevaluate, and reorder everything we have learned about the Bible. I have been a student of the Bible for many years, and the more I study the history and the Bible, the more intriguing and fascinating I find the journey. The more I learn about the ancient Near East cultures and literature, the more appreciation I have for my Christian heritage and the complexity of the biblical worldview. My advice to you is to let the Bible be what it's meant to be. Be open to the realm of the supernatural worldview of the ancient Israelites and the people of antiquity. Seek to understand the biblical writers and keep in mind that the content of the Bible needs to make sense in its own context, whether or not it makes sense in ours. I appreciate the fact that you have taken the time to listen to this presentation. There will be other presentations, but it'll be some time in the making because I'm quite busy and it's quite a bit of preparation. So hopefully you will come back to my podcast site or my blog site, Supernatural Insight, or my YouTube channel. It's all can be found by Google searching Supernatural Insight. Thank you, and I hope I have helped you in your journey of knowing and exploring the interesting historical data that's available to us today.